Now it's time for me to introduce you to the next speaker. It's an honor to introduce Daniel Lee. A fundamental aspect of Daniel's work is this desire to develop works that are decentering the human agency and the human subjectivity. So it's my pleasure to welcome you, Daniel, up on stage and their presentation about more than human, more than you, and more than me. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Let me just prepare here, and I'll be here with you shortly. My name is Daniel. I'm an artist. What I'm sharing today is related with my artistic research. I've been interested in what I do and doing what I do in the past 10 years, more specifically working with installations. I work in partnership between humans and other than humans. I also like to present my pronouns. I go for they, them. And right now I am bringing communication with you all through my human ways. I'm using my voice. I'm using the gestures in my face. I am trying to convey this message to you. You're listening to it. If you're visually impaired, you can see me using my gesture, using my expression, trying to grab your attention right now for the next few minutes. And you are using your muscles, using your ears to convey this communication. The terminology other than humans I stumbled upon when I got familiar with the author Edward Kong. What are the other than humans? They can be bacteria, they can be viruses, they could be plants, animals, ancestors, deities, time itself, the elements. And they are the ones who I work in partnership. And I wonder if I'm seeing this methodology of communicating right now with you all, how can I develop communication between them? How can I perceive communication between them? The way I'm sharing a bit today is through storytellings, how in each work that I've developed, something happened. So I would like to start with the experience of silence. In this, the work that I developed in Vienna called That Center for the Living in 2017 with the partnership of the artist Vivian Kakuri. This installation was made with elements who are changing throughout time. Long structures that were sprouting, line seeds, water in vessels who were evaporating, flowers who were decaying there, the sound installation of Vivian, the ground with soil. And to enter this space, we had some conditions. We asked people to leave all their belongings that would remind them of time on the outside. Watches, wallets, shoes, cell phones, their purses, and etc. And one specific condition that we also asked them is to live their communicating through words out on the outside, and inside communicate in other ways. We, as a Western society, we're very word-based and word-centric community and society. The intention behind this was, what if we remove this way of communication? Does our ways to perceive and our senses, they expand? I come from a background of education, and I'm always curious to talk with people after they attend the installations, and this is also part of my methodology of research as well. So after people would attend the Death Center for the Living, I would ask them, how was your experience like? There's always mysterious involved in my pieces, something mysterious happening. But often people will tell me that they were there for a couple of hours and they thought they were there for 30 minutes. Or the opposite, they were there for a very short amount of time, and then they thought they were there for even longer. I found quite interesting that my initial intention was to expand the senses when people were telling me that their relationship with time was starting to change and shift. For the next experience, I'm going to talk about smell in the work Between the Blessed and the Curse in 2017, presented in the Yogyakarta Biennale in Yogyakarta in Indonesia, in the island of Java. This work was homage to my ancestors, and I was already bringing mold and fungi intentionally to the work. For this project, there are many ceramic vessels, and in those ceramic vessels, I place a sugary liquid solution plant base. I picked up some mold, and I distributed this mold throughout these vases. The conditions of this room, it was a closed room. There were no outdoor light coming in. It's Indonesia, quite warm. And majority of the time when this exhibition was not open, it was dark. So it's a very good condition for mold to develop. My initial intention was to create some type of smell in that room and perfume, a quite pleasing smell. Much to my surprise, the smell of it was quite the opposite, was stinking. And the stench would resemble the smell of human feces. Quite powerful smell, quite overwhelming smell. Upon that, I got very curious to see people's reaction once they enter the space and just observe. So there were kids who entered the space and they would start to make sounds of nausea and leave quickly. Other people, because of the color of the walls, they would take selfies and start to create a very weird situation. They were posing while they were involved with that stench. One person particularly got my attention. This person entered the room and they stayed there with quite a shocked expression on their faces, looking all over, all around, and just stay there. I bring the situation because I felt that this person was bombarded by information that were not only focused on the head, but also in the body. But what I also bring from this situation was my acknowledgement and awareness of somebody else. If in the beginning I was intending to use this other than humans, this fungi as an object, having a purpose, they show me the other way around. They had their own intention. They were communicating themselves through the smell. I took some notes on that. The next topic, personality consciousness, and the work Queen, 2018, part of the exhibition The Negative Years in Jupiter Artland and the Berg, Scotland. Queen is a work that is a leader of a monarchy. It's a gender neutral or gender non-conforming or transgender word of this leader of a monarchy. For this work is an outcome of 4 years of my artistic research and 2 years of site-specific research. Here we developed a bioheater. So this is a gallery and the outside of the gallery. And here this bioheater is more than 1 ton of compost that is decomposing. We place some tubes inside of this decomposing matter. This decomposing matter would create heat. These tubes that were coming in, pumping water, would go back in with this warm water and heat up the inside of the gallery. Inside of the gallery, we had the walls painted with turmeric. There was some vessels there, these long structures who had straw and mycelia, oyster mushrooms, and then these ceramic vases who were filled with plant-based material in a liquidated way. Right now, around us, there are invisible to our eyes organisms that are surrounding us, can be many of them, and a lot of them I also believe they are unnamed. So those ceramic vessels, I offer them as home to those invisible to our eyes. As time passes by and these elements inside of this vessel start to ferment, start to decompose, they start to become more apparent. You can start to smell them, you can start to see them on the surface of the vase. Likewise, for these long structures, As time would pass by, the mycelia, the white matter would start to grow more and more. And here I bring a quite interesting story. This was like a large show. Everything was handmade. There was a lot of people working together. In the process of 40 days there, I was constantly working, developing work every day, like 8 hours a day. I was there in the space. I was working while these beings were already developing. One day, the creator of the show comes with a guest and asks me to talk a little bit about this work. At this time, I was already aware about the other than humans. I was already dedicating the works to them, and also considering them my partners in creation. In this specific work, in this specific exhibition, they were the protagonists. Bear in mind that also this work comes from the realm of monarchy, just like Scotland and the UK is a monarchy system. While I'm there encountering the curator and we're having this conversation, I start to talk about the work. As I start to talk, the air starts to get thicker and heavier. It gets harder and harder to talk. It feels like something is choking me. I keep trying to talk, but then it gets impossible, and then we cannot breathe anymore there, and then we need to leave immediately. I was already aware of and very curious about mycology. I was aware that what was happening there was possibly perhaps a release of spores that those mycelia were doing, those fungi were doing. But after the experience, I started to think why the situation didn't happen the other days I was working intensively towards this work. Why it only happened in the moment that the protagonist came to me talking about the experience of the exhibition. Was that space conscious of our presence? Was this conjunction of the vases decomposing, the structures with the oyster mushrooms, the bioheater on the outside, all of them coming together, one to help the other to exist? Were they creating this community, this consciousness, relating with this work of monarchy, me feeling as a servant? Did they have a personality? Next topic I'm going to talk about is relationship and grieving for the work Non-Negotiable Condition in 2021 in the exhibition Berlin Now in Berlin, Germany, where I'm currently based and live at. What I do is a proposition. I am proposing an experience to people who come in and stay. The work is changing every day. It is important to people not only to attend, spend some time there, but also return. Even though I propose that, I live very little this type of experience. I have very little the possibility to stay throughout the whole duration of the show, because usually I do the whole work, then I have to return to where I live. And this situation was quite the opposite, because I was living a few blocks away and I could go to the exhibition 2 or 3 times a week. Having in mind the previous exhibition experience, that I noticed that, oh, there is some conscience here. What is this? I was interested to know better what this would become. In this year, I also lost one of the fundamental loves in my life. This person died of COVID-19. COVID-19, I also bring the awareness that it's an other than human, an invisible to our eye, viruses who change completely our ways to exist in this world. I would attend this work in a grieving state. There were days who were very hard, ways I was with a lot of emotions. But once I was there in this environment and stayed, something changed. Something on my way changed. As the day passed by, I would start to notice the flowers decaying. I would start to notice the vases growing mold. I would start to notice different areas who had different smells. See the fungi developing, happily finding that they accepted my invitation to live in that place, and also they're bringing and having mushrooms. I am here right now. I'm communicating with you right now. This type of communication that I'm doing with you, it's only possible if I am alive. Understanding death and going through the process of grieving, this is not possible anymore. But we can find ways through our technology to have testimonies. We have our memories, we have our feelings. Through our technology, we can have videos, we can have photos, we can have audio being recorded, or we can have like letters and etc. Once I am dead, this is not possible anymore in this way. The installation has those criteria as well. The installation only happened once. It cannot be redone. Even if somebody without my authorization tries to redo it, also the beings who were there at that time, I don't think they're possible to return. Through the experience of grieving, I also understood that how profoundly me as a human, I am very dependent on a human society. I'm very dependent on a human community. I'm also thinking if I am constantly visiting this installation and I'm returning and creating a relationship with it, a relationship is needed to a constancy of being part of each other's life. Am I also dependent on an ecological community? My final topic, rotten, breaking the binary, for the exhibition Unnamed Entities in 2022 in the New Museum in New York, United States. When we're hungry and we want to eat, for instance, an apple, and then we go to a basket of fruit and we grab that apple that we want to kill our hunger or give us some nourishment. We do this gesture to picking up the apple, and by our surprise, we take a look and that apple is rotten. We might instantly throw that apple away without giving a second thought. So in this intention of having a fruit, eating it to nourish our life, but we see it that actually is rotten, are we relating that image of rottenness to death? Are we rejecting that fruit because we think that is death? But if we stay with it, we grab the apple and keep looking at it and take a deeper look. And we start to see the mold on it. We start to see the amount of life that's happening in it. And then if we leave that apple in the table and we go back the next day, we're probably going to see there's even more stuff happening there. Maybe now there's a home for bacteria and fungi. Maybe insects are making that apple a landscape and their home as well. So in that initial idea that we had, that apple was an image of death. If we are taking a look in this rotten state, maybe there's even more life there. Having that in mind, this in-between, this non-binary state that rottenness is, I try to think the exhibition a bit as an expanded feeling and relationship with that. Throughout these 10 years, I've been developing in my research and proposing to the audience these spaces that has elements who are constantly changing. Flower structures that are usually used for rituals of death are there in the space. The exhibition starts, they are very fresh, and then they start to decay and dry it out. These long structures that I call them members, they're filled with straws and mycelia and covered with mud and seeds. The seeds start to sprout, the seeds start to decay, the mushrooms start to come out, and terracotta ceramic vases who have been present in our humanity throughout millennia, they have inside of them plant-based material who is fermenting, rotting. All of these elements together, they start to form this environment. My proposition, my question is, what does happen to one when they enter that space? How do they relate with it? What are the emotions, feelings triggered by it? Always something mysterious happens in these works. Always something that is beyond my idea, beyond my scope. Every time that something mystery happened, that kind of like feeds me, my curiosity, that keeps me making move, that keeps me making me going. I found this way of relating with it, dedicating myself with them, with this other than humans, some way a communication that is not based on the communication that I'm having with you right now. But I wonder some things. One, what is the message? which I think I still need a few decades to figure out what it is. Second, I wonder how these environments they can contribute with our perception of existing in the world. But thirdly, in my personal experience, these other humans, they kept giving me agency to exist in the world. In moments that things were very hard to exist, they kept pushing me. Like, that happened, how can I keep going? How can I reproduce this type of effect? How can I contribute with them more? How can we collaborate more? How can I be more aware of it? How can we develop communication better? How can I perceive beyond my human centrism? How can I escape the human supremacy of existing in this world? For this, it's also very important to me to talk with people. It's also very important to me to open it up and ask them, what was your experience like? And now I would like to open up the floor for us to have a conversation. And if we don't have enough time, we can continue talking throughout this day. Thank you.
Hi, I wanted to. I can say my background. I'm an architect and also have been recently making some artworks that are somehow similar to what you're doing, experimenting with decomposition and growth and decay. I just want. It's a very simple question about documentation because the images you show are extremely beautiful, but in a lot of ways, I guess they're quite conventional ways of showing an artwork in a gallery. Very carefully composed. The floor is extremely clean where it's not intended to be, and you're very beautifully dressed, presenting. But then you talk about the 40 days that you spent in the exhibition, and I guess I just want to see the dirt on you also and the process, and I wonder whether that's something that you did consciously because it's an important way is a conventional way of communicating the artworks, or whether that's something that you had considered the kind of longer durée of the composition as a piece that's part of the story also.
What exactly?
I mean you being dirty. I mean imagine and also like the arrival of the dirt and the space as it's transformed from a white cube space into this kind of living space, and also maybe the cleaning up afterwards, like the longer life that also includes you as an embodied artist.
Thank you so much for your question. I think there's many different answers to that. One of them is there's a lot of negotiation with spaces. Like this exhibition that I did in the new museum was the first time I was showing in a museum space. So I was aware for many years that those type of institutions, they are very contrary of my practice because they're very much concerned about conservation. So in order to do this in the museum, there were needed a lot of negotiation. Even like how much space of soil and dirt we can have it, you know. I often present works with spaces that had memory and who are not white cube. I prefer use them because that's also where the research and the connection with the space start. I'm very interested in the memory of a space. I also have limits with space that had very harsh memories. I don't feel mature enough to work with them. Regarding the presentation, the process of soil, these are only the representation of the images. What I'm showing today is this testimony of something that lived, but what I'm proposing, we are proposing together, is the one-on-one relationship. And that's where what people tell me from their experience, it becomes stronger. So often, even though a lot of these installations are monumental, I find quite interesting when they talk to me that how much they were paying attention to the small details. This one specifically in New York, which is this crazy metropolis, very big. Everybody was telling me about the small, how they were able to perceive this little performance of the bugs, how they were seeing the small plants coming out. And that, I found it quite interesting, and the relationship with it. Another aspect of the work, which is very important, is the many smells who are there. I call it this olfactory geography, this invisible architecture. As people walk by and they are there in the space, there are areas where you find a smell and then you find the other. So what you're asking me, it's not translatable. It's really on the one-on-one relationship. Regarding how I present them and how I am working with a marginalized topic, and then I need to use how social media and society, they open space for what is better presented. So I see myself as an employee of my work. So today I'm kind of like the CEO of Apple, and I need to do the talk for them, you know, and they're my boss. And sometimes they are my teachers, another time they're my lovers. Or in the Queen, they were like training me as a mere servant that does not appreciate me at all, you know. So I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very beautiful presentation. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on how I perceived it, because that might be of interest for you. So I thought it was very beautiful, as I said, and a good way of communicating. I think humans have a very difficult relationship to specifically death. And through this work, I felt that you managed to open up for discussion and thinking about it without it being complicated. So I think that was a good way of communicating the relationship between humans and death, because often soil or rotten is related to death, and in our society I feel it's a bit taboo and hard to talk about because it's something sad, it's something tragic. So I really like that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm curious as to you express how you developed a relationship to the life there that kind of blossomed in a sense. What did you do at the end of the exhibitions as far as disposing of this material, and how is that relationship?
Well, thank you for this question. Very important as well. This practice developed in parallel. I was nomad, so the whole idea of conserving, preserving something, or having a storage to keep things was not possible. Also, I come from background. The people from my families, they were hoarders, and I had one very strong experience in my life was going to my grandparents' house and removing the items that were value to our family. This house, which was a house of an immigrant family who has always been protected, and I was not able to access and touch these items. My aunts, they were very restricted to it. I returned to that house when the house hadn't been inhabited for 2 years. Everything that I remember was there in place, but time took over. Everything was molded. Termite was eating the whole library. Things had a lot of dust around them. It came to me that moment, the question, like, what is the purpose of keep having things? Seeing that on myself. And that's not a question that I had answered like, oh, it's irrelevant. I also see the values on it. But the whole thing about the transformation and be aware where things came before and where things are going, and not just because I present them in the work, they don't have a story before, or they don't not gonna have something after. Nothing just vanish. So I work with these materials who are perishable. There's always the idea that everything goes to the composter afterwards. If elements they are not that perishable, like the terracotta vases, for instance, they're donated with people who want plant on them. The flags that I use them, they are cotton base. I rework on them and make other works with it. And now that I have a base, it's been recent that I'm not nomad anymore. Now there's a possibility to have these elements again in the work. So this is a very strong ethical concern of mine. You know. I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's a lovely presentation. Yes, I'm learning something interesting with, at least with the first two presentations. I just wanted to point out to one thing regarding death, is that it's a process. And one of the interesting things that I see with most of your works, and I think we almost ignore, is something like suspended animation. And suspended animation, I'm sure the scientists here could maybe give more in-depth into it. It's like a thing is almost dead, but not yet dead. It's like when fossils of extremophiles get trapped in ice and they haven't been alive for millions of years, and out of some mistake through a certain human, or maybe the sun melts down and bacteria that hasn't been alive for hundreds of millions of years just comes back to life. And I think these are still engagements we find like within the works where there are these, invisible presences, like you say, like microbial spores, then certain viable conditions come together, then they just sprout. So that's, for me, it's, just a different way to look at death, where it's implicit of life itself. Yeah, where death is not necessarily an end. Yeah.
I think that's also the part where I feel that it's non-binary, like this illusion that we live in a binary society just makes things harder. The person who I lost also lost a parent when they were young. And I was like, why you never told me about your experience? Maybe if you told me about your experience of losing a parent young, I could have been more prepared. Why has this topic of death has always been a taboo? There's so many answers. One of them is related with our capitalistic society. But then also this in-between, that there's no end or beginning of one or another. We're all gonna go through the experience of death, and that's a individual experience. It's the right. We have the right to die. We have the right to find our moment of death. It is a big mystery. What will be the moment that we're gonna die? That's the question that's happened to me. We are now in the moment, like, I'm in the moment that I'm in the symposium. I'm sitting in the table. I'm drinking water. What is gonna be like the moment I die? It's incredibly mysterious. Will there be an after? Will there be a before? And what does that happens? I've been incredibly impacted by death of the other, and how the death of the other, which I think we are always we're dealing with the death of the others, dealing with the death of something else, dealing with the death of an environment. But we are witnessing that while we are alive. And this is part of it. But what I found it the most infuriating, what gave me a lot of anger, is why, if this is a condition, why, if this is a non-negotiable condition of living and dying, why is it treated like this is not part of it? I need to eat. I need to go to the toilet. I need to sleep. I need to die. And this type of tabooing, the marginalization of conditions of existing, which I also find very strong with my own identity, and how society does this type of hypocrisy, it just makes things worse and worse. And I think I connect a bit with you. One of the proposition of this environment is to enter and have a suspension of that, of those experiences, and seeing this happening. I understand these environments as a technology, not in a machinery sense, maybe more in a decolonial perspective. What does that promote to one? And it's also a very individual experience. When I ask a person, what was your experience like? It's very much related how their feelings and their emotions were responding to the environment. And that experience completely valid and different from other. When I go to the exhibition, I'm not going there, I'm the creator of this. I'm just going as somebody who's experienced it as well. So sometimes it's a space for meditation, No. Thank you for your topic. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation and your questions. So we're going to have time for a short break now.
Okay.
So if anybody would like some coffee or some tea, there's going to be some served down at the end of the room here. And then we're going to continue again in a few minutes.
Thank you, everyone. Woo!